Hi everyone, so actually this video was ready to go this morning. However, when I played it back last night, I realized there were some issues with the audio and I just couldn't publish it like that because I feel that the content is really good. And so I didn't want to put you off the video or the tutorial, or essentially color therapy is supposed to be relaxing or make you feel better, happier. So I thought that audio just was kind of ruining the whole thing. And so I decided to do the voiceover. Now I'm going to be working today in Stillman and Birn sketchbook, which is a beta series. All the information is down below, always check, and including the links. So here I'm showing you a photograph I took at Wimpole, which I went to yesterday, and it started raining when I got there, and so the lighting was perfect because in the little breaks that there was no rain, the light was perfect, which made the image really crisp and realistic rather than when it's sunny. It's actually very hard to take good pictures. It's overexposed most of the time. So here you can see a beautiful Dahlia flower. So in their gardens there are loads and loads of them, just a huge amount of different varieties, and this particular one stood out to me because it's the happiest color combination. It's that hot fluorescent pink, which, by the way, if I had to pick one color to fit in with that brightness, it would be opera pink. It's like the perfect match. So without needing to mix the color or anything like that, just straight out of the tube. And the hot pink combined with the yellow of the center and the sort of the vibrant red is just the happiest combination in my mind, and so I thought it will be perfect for today's episode. So just before I was showing you anemone and a little doodling I've been doing, so I've been kind of doing florals more often again. And this sketchbook, I'm just showing you a couple of images from here. This is where I did a few of the other tutorials that you may have seen already. And it's a sketchbook where I do my botanicals. So here I'm sharing with you the information. Is the 270 GSM extra heavyweight beta series, and it's a Wirebound. I think I said that before. So it's great for watercolors, and the white of the paper is perfectly white. It's not leaning towards a cool tone or a warm tone, so botanical to me looks really good, makes the colors look very crisp. So yeah, so I keep this sketchbook for botanical art where I do more kind of realistic illustrations, but I also decided to do some that are more stylized, like this doodle. And I'm starting by drawing out what I would call a floral doodle. So I'm simplifying all the lines, and sorry that the sketchbook is positioned at the bottom of the picture. I will fix it in a minute, so it won't be the whole video like that. Yeah, so I'm just continuing with doodling and simplifying all the lines, which tends to be an easier version of drawing. So I'm not concentrating at every single detail, and that's what also, obviously, doodles are always fun and quite relaxing. The obviously eliminating the more difficult part of drawing makes it more fun as well, and then after that you just jump into these beautiful, super bright and cheerful colors. So that's the idea here. As I'm now moving on to a little bit of detail, this is as far as I will go, just drawing out a few of those yellow shapes, and then the very dark center of the flower, which is sort of like little circular shapes, and I didn't want to fill in the entire circle of it. As you saw there was just a little bit of a little part of it, and you'll see with the other flowers I will do the same. So it's just suggesting that is the texture and the shape of the center of the flower, but you don't need to overdo it, basically keeping it nice and simple. So I've done it there again. Now this flower, actually all of the three flowers are at an angle, and drawing flowers at an angle, or anything at an angle, it could be also a face, anything that you can think of, is always more challenging than when you look straight at it. But when you are drawing it, it would be a more interesting illustration than just looking at something straight ahead. So I struggled there a little bit. As you can see, the first flower looks completely sort of flat because of that, because I drew it as if I looked straight onto it rather than angling it slightly. I tried to do it, but it's not enough. And the mistake I made is by not shortening some of those petals. And the same thing on the second flower, although I managed to twist the flower a little bit by changing the shape of the center of the flower, so that helped a little. But I should have done those petals on the left top side a little bit shorter, and that would suggest again more angle. So now I am moving on to this little bud, which you can see is on a photograph, slightly shifted to the left. I decided to reposition it for the purpose of a good composition. Composition is also something I used to struggle with, and now it kind of feels a little bit easier to find what should go where. So when I'm looking at the paper that I'm drawing on, my eye kind of guides in a certain direction where I think, okay, there is a little place here that needs to be filled, and so I will move it there. And also obviously it has to do with your own style. You may decide to put it somewhere else, and it could equally work beautiful, because you know we tend to see things and colors in a slightly different way, I believe. So now I'm doing the third flower, and that didn't come out like I was hoping at all. So yeah, the shape is not, it's supposed to look up onto the left, and it's just sort of straight ahead again, but that is fine, you know. It's it was still a lot of fun to doodle it and draw it, and don't give yourself a hard time. Like here, you know, if I had something in mind and it didn't quite work out the way I was envisioning it, then that's still fine, because you are still getting the good from drawing either way. So I decided, in the true fashion of doodling, create these thin stems, and later I will also connect that little bud there, which I haven't done here, so it looks like it's floating at the minute. And for the stems, I find that simplifying them to the minimum, literally just one single line, to me makes it look fresh and clean, and it has that aesthetics that I like. So here I'm filling in the spaces between the stems with some foliage, and the foliage is quite interesting, of that specific dahlia that I picked to paint. So the foliage is somewhere between like a aubergine browny, greeny, kind of dark, dramatic color. And of course that makes these super bright pink dahlia flowers stand out even more. They're really beautiful. So I will try to mix the right colors for the foliage. So here I am showing you my Kilner jar, which I only have one of them, and I wish I bought two, because it really does come convenient to have 2 jars of water. And anyone who has been doing watercolor for a while will tell you this, that it's the best tip in terms of keeping the colors clean and not muddy them up too quickly, is by keeping 2 jars of water. So one would be your dirty water and the other one clean, so you would always use the second jar for that extra bit of cleaning of the brush from the previous dirty water, if that makes sense. So we will now, I think here at this point I realized I had to connect that little bud, yes, to the rest of the flowers. And basically, as you can see, I left it at that. I didn't go along and connect it all the way down from underneath the flower. The extra stalk, I felt I didn't have to draw in, because the eye will do the rest. It will connect it visually. So also less lines is kind of less confusing and more clean, I suppose. Well, it depends what you like. So here I'm going to pick my Opera Pink, which is in my Daniel Smith palette. I actually need to update it because it's a mess in there. I've done some swatches there, as you can see, some mixing, so that's not useful because I can't really use the mixing palette. And also the swatch card is no longer how it was first put together, and then I added a couple more colors, and there are still a couple spaces there, so I think I should just update it and then I'll do a video for you. I know you enjoy those videos. So here's the Opera Pink. And I personally like the Daniel Smith the best. I find it's beautifully revettable. I like the transparency of it, because some are quite bright, but sort of on a perhaps more chalky, semi-transparent kind of texture. But this one is beautifully transparent and super, super bright. You can literally make it glow off the paper, or you can water it out. But it also is, I mean, it is quite challenging to work with this color on its own, and this is a very rare occasion where the flower was literally this color in nature. You won't find it very often, but it does sort of exist like that. Also, some cacti flowers have that brightness to them, so it does truly exist like that, but just not very often. And therefore, unless you're painting that specific flower that is that color, you will find it very challenging to use this color on its own. However, I learned this very recently from Jane Haynes, that this color is actually I'm talking about Opera Pink. It's very useful as a mixing agent, so you can create some lovely skin tones when you combine it with yellow ochre, or perhaps other colors like rutile yellow by Schminke, and a variety of other colors as well. So yeah, it's actually really good to have in your palette. So I had this Opera Pink for a long time. It was actually one of my very first colors that I bought from Daniel Smith. So it was Opera Pink and Moon Glow. I don't remember the rest, but I do remember those two were the very first two colors. So I bought it because a lot of watercolorists talked about it and mentioned it, and how amazing it is and unique it is, and obviously for its brightness. But I have never well, I used it, I tried to use it in the beginning, and I struggled a little because of its brightness and fluorescence. It's very sort of, you know, kind of neon almost, glowy type of a color. But yeah, so I left this color for a while without really doing anything with it, and like I said, recently I started using it again, realizing how useful it actually is. And also, if you are going to do any other like pink or red or orange type of colors, if we're talking about florals and they're bright, if you need to brighten something and lift it to the max, basically put a little bit of opera pink into there and you will see some magic happening. It literally lifts every color within that similar color hue and creates that brightness. Do keep in mind that opera pink is a fluorescent color, which means that it is not light fast, and it's fine for working in sketchbooks, which are, you know, left closed most of the time anyway. Don't leave the, you know, sketchbook open if you used opera pink and you live in a hot country, or it's middle of the summer and the, you know, it's like by the window and the sun is just really bleaching it. That's what will happen. The brightness will start to go. So keep that in mind. And obviously, if you want to paint and hang the painting on your wall, and it's okay if it's like you know, a wall in a shade, like when the light doesn't really hit it, the sunlight from the outside, I suppose that would be all right. But anything that comes into direct sunlight, this color will lose its vibrancy because it's not light fast. So that's something to keep in mind. So as you can see, I have left quite a bit of white highlights on the petals. I really like this style because I feel like when I fill the entire petal with watercolor, it just starts looking flat to me. And then I would need to lift certain areas and then add more color, and it just starts to look a little bit overworked. So that's why I left the white areas. So here I have moved on to Alizarin Crimson, which is one of my all-time favorite colors by Daniel Smith. So it's a red, well, a pinky red, and it's just gorgeous, beautiful color, and it teams up in this composition just perfectly. And wherever the opera pink was still wet, you can see Alizarin Crimson just traveled into it, and wherever, like here, I'm just trying to soften the edges, wherever the color was already dried underneath, then it just sort of sits there and doesn't look really natural. So that's why I introduced a little bit of water, softened it with damp but not fully wet brush, and then added a little bit more Alizarin Crimson straight in, and that's what created that beautiful watercolor effect. This is where watercolor is at its best, and yeah, one flows into the another color and they mix and they create these lovely blooms and puddles and whatnot. So it's gorgeous. So here I am trying to mix up that very dark green that I was talking about of the foliage, and I think it had a little bit more red tone in nature, so it's kind of really has that aubergine kind of reddish violet type of color in the foliage. I did mix in a bit of red into my very dark green, however possibly not as much, but I really didn't mind it. I really liked the color as it is. It's not a realistic representation there. I just wanted to make sure I capture the shape of the leaves and have a few of them there, just to, you know, bring it a bit more to that resemblance of the real thing, but without being too realistic. So I'm also taking the same color just into the tips of the little leaves on the bud, and I will mix up a slightly more juicier green to go into the other part of the leaf, which you'll see in a minute or in a few seconds. And then those two colors will blend together, and I will also saturate the tips again with a darker color, and that will look pretty nice. That actual bud had a bit of that dark red mixed with some green in there, so that's what I will try to create here. But you need to be careful, because if you touch the green into that very strong Alizarin Crimson when it's still wet, you basically will get a little bit of a muddy color. So if you want that kind of green to be green and the red to be red, you kind of need to wait a little bit for it to dry, so that they don't run into one another too much. And or you can just leave a little bit of the gap in between the colors. So I left it at that. And so you can see at this point the water is starting to get a bit dark, and this is when another jar of the water would be good, just to ensure that everything is as clean as possible. But I haven't used any opaque colors here so far, so that's the main thing. When you start using opaque colors, that's when the water gets really dirty. Okay, so here I'm going into New Gamboge. All the links are provided below, as I said before, if you're interested to check them out. And I'm doing the same thing as I did before, just dipping my brush into areas and still leaving the white of the paper, which helps with the texture of the flowers. And the brush that I'm using is a silver black velvet size 6 round brush, and it's perfect for that because I can control the water with it, and I can have enough water when I need it. Right into the center I put a very dark color, which I think was quinacridone violet, so all the colors by Daniel Smith, and that is pretty much it. So the colors, the yellows, the violet, the alizarin crimson, everything starts to move into one another, so it's good to do it when the previous color is still a little bit damp or wet and has that glistening on the paper. So I hope you enjoyed this episode and you had so much fun watching it, and it will inspire you to go and recreate it. So thanks for watching and see you soon.